Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the City of Canby's Budget Committee to order. First, we will start with a roll call. Tim Dale.
Here.
Tracy Height.
Here.
Tracy Hensley.
Here.
Michelle Hensley.
Here.
Andrea McCracken.
Here.
Did I butcher that too bad?
No, you did good.
There you go, see? Me, I'm here, obviously. Greg Parker will be here shortly.
About 6:30, he said.
Okay. Bob Patterson.
Here.
Sarah Spoon.
Here.
Jennifer Trudy. Trindy.
She's absent.
Oh, absent, okay. Oh, yeah, right there, it says absent. Sean Varwig.
Here.
And Edward Warnock.
Here.
Or Warnock, sorry.
Warnock.
And then we have Brian Hudson on the speakerphone tonight, joining us remotely.
Yes.
So with that, we do have a quorum. Oh, whoops, sorry, I skipped something. We have to do the Pledge of Allegiance first. If everybody will please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, there we go. Okay, so with that, we've done that. Now we will get back on track with old business, approval of the minutes from the March 21st, 2019 meeting. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
So moved by Tim Dale, seconded by Tracy Hensley. Is there any questions or discussion? Any amendments?
No.
Seeing none, we'll proceed with a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Are there any abstentions? None noted, and the minutes are approved. Okay, with that, we will move on to new business, which will be review of the fiscal year 2019-2020 proposed budget. And I will pass it off to our city administrator, Rick.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to present to you this evening the proposed fiscal year 2019-2020 budget for the city of Canby. We are mixing the schedule up just a little bit. You're used to seeing the general fund first, and this year we'll be seeing all of the other funds except the general fund and the urban renewal budget this week, and next week you'll see general fund and the urban renewal budget. That was to accommodate some scheduling conflicts that have come up over the last several months. As part of the development of last year's budget, we prioritized succession planning as a primary deliverable. To implement this priority, we added several positions within our organization. When last year's budget was presented, I informed you that it would take 2 to 3 years to fully absorb the costs associated with the new positions, but that the need to take action was so great, the long-term benefit would outweigh the short-term cost. As we enter the second year of this strategy, a portion of the 2019-20 budget will, as projected, be funded from available reserves. Even with their use in this budget, the city's general fund reserves will continue to meet the recommended threshold of 30% of revenue generated. As in prior years, our department managers were asked to submit a status quo budget and to fine-tune revenue projections. No new positions were authorized in the initial general fund budget submittals. After reviewing the budget submittals and incorporating expected increases in PERS retirement rates, health insurance rates, and other anticipated personnel services increase, the gap between budgeted revenues and anticipated expenditures was too great. Finance and administration have worked together to identify opportunities for budget savings, and department heads were asked to review their budget submittals and remove any new program requests and non-required training expenses, and to defer or eliminate any additional costs not required for the budget year. The result of this collaborative efforts is a 2019-20 budget that draws approximately $130,000 against existing reserves. Because I remain concerned that the use of even this relatively modest level of reserves may have significant impacts on future year budgets, I'm committed to identifying and implementing additional cost savings measures through the budget year that will serve to reduce our dependence on reserves in the years ahead. City operations have seen strong revenue growth in a number of areas over the past 4 years as our economic recovery continues in our region. While the strong revenue performance has been beneficial to the city, we also recognize this pattern is not sustainable in the long term. With this in mind, my objective continues to be to proactively review and implement the organizational changes required to address our most critical service needs in the community within the limited resources available to meet those needs. While commercial and residential development has experienced a strong rebound over the last 4 years, we're beginning to see some calming of the real estate market and a need to be prepared for the inevitable slowdown. If past economic trends are an indicator of our future economic prospects, we should expect that slowdown in economic activity in the next 2 to 3 years. The proposed budget for fiscal year 2019-20 expenditures totals $26.6 million, representing an increase of $1.5 million or 5% from our prior year budget. Personnel service budget for fiscal 19-20 is $12.2 million. This is 4.9% higher than the current fiscal 2018-19 budget. Increased retirement and healthcare expenses are a significant factor in this increase. Total materials and services expenses for the proposed budget for the general fund are $2.4 million, which is the same as that budgeted in our 2018-19 fiscal year. The fund balance in this general fund is projected to decrease by about $300,000 from $3 million at June 30th, 2019 to $2.7 million at June 30th, 2020. Overall, we expect the fund balance will stay at approximately 30% of operating revenues in our fiscal year 19-20. The decrease in the general fund has two components. One-time capital expenditures account for $169,000 of the fund balance reductions, and the funding of operating expenses will consume approximately $131,000. A number of street projects are scheduled for 2019-20, utilizing both current revenue and street maintenance reserves. With larger and more expensive projects, funding will often be accumulated over several years before a project is actually scheduled for construction. That actually is happening in our 2019-20 fiscal year. We have some fairly significant projects budgeted. The Transit Fund is a special revenue fund with the majority of its funding coming from transit taxes collected from companies who do business in Canby. The fund balance reduction of approximately 11% in fiscal 19-20 is due to the appropriation of funds to purchase land for a new transit office. The Swim Levy Fund is a special revenue fund that receives most of its funding from a special operating tax levy. The levy is 49 cents per $1,000 of a tax assessed value. The anticipated reduction in reserves in the budget year is for the funding of much-needed capital repairs at our pool. Last year, we began preparations for the expected departure of key city management. Positions have been added in the planning department and police department, and plans are in place to bring additional staffing into our transit department during the 19-20 fiscal year. With planning and community development activities beginning to level off, I have not initially in our 2019-20 budget included funding in the planning department budget to replace an expected upcoming retirement. We have, however, identified resources on our general fund contingency appropriations to bring this position online quickly if land use activities indicate an increased demand for this service. The goals set forth by the City Council and Mayor form the guiding principles around which our budget is developed. To this end, a continuing focus in fiscal 19-20 is the funding of programs that support the Council goals to have safe and family-friendly environment within the Canby community. Specifically, the budget maintains the expanded parks staffing using dedicated revenue from our parks maintenance fee. The budget continues to financially support community-wide activities, including but not limited to Canby's Big Weekend, Canby Independence Day celebration, and Light Up the Night. Our budget continues to support tourism and economic development activities focused on bringing new opportunities to community residents and to businesses. The budget continues to embrace a new focus on Canby Library as a community resource, gathering place, and venue where residents of all ages can come, feel safe, and participate in community-sponsored events. The proposed budget increases the recommended general fund contribution from $50,000 to $75,000 to support our library's focus on delivering quality service to the community. I realize the allocation of additional funding will not solve the long-term needs of the library, but will allow the library to operate 6 days a week as staff continues to explore long-term solutions to meet the funding needs of this important program. The City Council has adopted financial policies to guide management in making sound budgetary and financial decisions. To this end, we will continue to work to identify sustainable revenue sources and, to the extent possible, fund operations with that sustainable revenue. The fiscal year 2018-19 budget included funding to proactively manage succession planning in our transit program. While the positions have not yet been filled, I'm recommending that they be maintained in the 19-20 fiscal year. In 2017-18, a new parks maintenance fee was established with the primary emphasis on funding of deferred maintenance in city parks, and additional staff have been added to the Parks Department to carry out this work. For fiscal year 2019-20, funding has been set aside to construct a new splash pad and replace worn and outdated equipment in city parks. The City of Canby approaches the development of the annual budget in a very conservative manner. Our budget presented to the Budget Committee and City Council must meet key criteria. First, does the budget generally address the organizational priorities of the Mayor and City Council? And second, are staffing levels, service levels, and contractual obligations sustainable in future budget cycles? And if not, what steps are proposed to align the budget with known and anticipated funding sources? This budget aligns with the adopted values and goals of the Mayor and City Council to the extent possible within available resources. It particularly embraces the Council value of fiscal responsibility and financial stability as outlined as follows. And I quote, "We constantly strive for the proper use of public funds and resources. We are prudent in our fiscal policies and practices as we plan for long-term financial sustainability within the city." This proposed budget presents a spending plan for 2019-20 that reflects the priorities, policies, and goals of the Canby City Council and the citizens it represents. Our continuing challenge is to maintain a focus on our priorities even in the face of rising costs. We continue to be a financially sound organization because of the proactive approach to budgeting that we employ. We will continue to adjust and adapt our expenditure plan as needed so that we can remain fiscally sound even as we embrace an overarching emphasis on customer service. This is my final budget for the City of Canby. It's been my sincere pleasure to work with you as city councilors, those of you who are current members of the Budget Committee and prior members of the Budget Committee. I particularly want to thank our department heads and Julie and our finance staff for their dedication. I have thoroughly enjoyed my time, as challenging as it sometimes is, and in developing budgets for you and keeping in mind the constant need to think not just of our current day needs, but the needs and obligations of this organization and this community in the future. And it's been my goal and my objective to leave each of those persons living in this community with a budget that is not only sustainable but meets the core values of this community. So I thank you very much for this opportunity to serve you, the citizens of this community, and look forward to our budget discussions over the next several weeks. Thank you.
Can we convince you to stay?
Not a chance.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
I would like to. I still plan to trap you in your office.
And that does conclude my budget message.
Thank you very much. And also thank you for the very level and sound judgment that you have brought these years to the city and to the budget and the committee. It is greatly appreciated. Before we get started, I will just let people know, in the spirit of my predecessor, Tim. We will have, not necessarily a bubble, I'm used to being called a parking lot for items that come up that we will need to revisit. So just don't fret, that parking lot is there, so if there is anything that comes up, questions or something we need to revisit later on through this process, please let me know and we will make a note of that, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason.
And now I'll turn it over to Julie. Or Rick, we'll turn it over to Julie or something like that.
The first budget that we have up for discussion this evening is the library fund. As I've indicated to you, my recommendation to this group and subsequently to the City Council will be that we increase funding from $50,000 to $75,000 from the general fund to support our library operations. As I shared somewhat passionate with you last year and believe equally strongly this year, our library performs a very critical service in this community. It's a gathering place, it's a community center, and it touches many, many lives throughout the year. Unfortunately, we're not able to meet the full funding needs of the library, and the outcome, if this budget is approved, will be that the library will continue to function very efficiently and very effectively. However, it will function only 6 days a week and not 7 days. The plan right now under discussion is to close on Sundays and to allocate staff proportionally across the other days. We had one position that is currently funded unfilled position that we will elect to not fill in the new year. We'll allocate time to part-time employees to fill the gap, and Irene has been working with staff and the library board very closely to develop a program and strategy to be able to continue to deliver quality services to this community. Irene and Kathleen and others who are in the audience tonight who are passionate about libraries and library funding are also working, and I believe Councillor Varwig is involved in discussions that will be ongoing with the county over the next several months in an attempt to identify funding opportunities within our current intra-county library system that will help us meet our long-term funding needs. However, that is not a solution for the 2019-20, and the budget that has been presented to you is one, including the $75,000 contribution from the general fund, is one that I support. There are no questions, and we'll move to the transit fund.
Okay.
And I assume that we'll treat this in a kind of an exception fashion, the way we typically do. I'll give you a quick overview, and then if there are no questions, we'll just move to the next. If there are questions, we can pause to answer those questions. If that works for the committee.
Can I ask a question about the library?
Yeah.
And I know it's like a no-win situation, but how do we expect that decreasing the number of days will impact our community? Like, do we expect a decrease in number of participants in the library, or like what's our expected outcome from that?
Sunday is actually our busiest day. You get 94 people per hour. Problem is distributing the staff. We only really have 8 staff with 4 calls to fill it. The biggest impact I think that we're having is the bilingual services. We don't offer any for what Lizzie can do. So we're only offering that. So we do see a very big decrease in the Spanish population already coming into the library.
What's the difference between where we are and making Sunday happen?
Probably another $50,000 or so.
50.
Yeah.
50,000.
Wasn't it around 125? The difference between if we were to fund that other position and not fill it. I think it's an additional $50,000. We were looking at 125 to 150 as the need if we were going to be funding that position and staying open 7 days.
But you said Sunday was your busiest day?
If you look at the per hour, it actually is the busiest day. The busiest day is Sunday at 94 people per hour, Wednesday at 90 people per hour, Tuesday at 84, Thursday 82, Monday 78, Saturday 66, and Friday 70.
Is there an option to give up a different day than
You
Sunday?
want to come up and speak to this?
Yeah. Like, is there an option, if we have to give up a day and Sunday is our busiest day, is there an option to give up a different day than Sunday?
The issue is that Sundays is busy in the afternoon, but would it be busy in the morning? And then we have full-time staff, and you're getting into the AFSCME contract with having to have somebody that's supervisory also. You can't just have substitutes, so to speak, come in and work on the desk and not having any type of...
What's our slowest day of the week?
Slowest day of the week is Friday.
And on Friday, we're open 10 to 5, as I recall.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is there an option to give up Friday and keep Sunday?
We've asked the library board and our library director to give us their best recommendation based on how the staffing pattern will work. And Irene has put together some extraordinary complex
Many
Scenarios.
and there really isn't, just because we have to staff, we don't want to force our regular employees to work partial
days a
days,
week.
6 days a week.
can't
We
do
want to
that.
find a way to be able to be respectful of their private, personal time as well. And this is the best, as I understand it, the best solution that we've been able to develop. We're hoping that it's just 1 year that this has to happen, and that we're able to regather and regroup and maybe find a different funding source to support the library in the future. We talked a number of different scenarios, none of which are particularly viable or would allow us to improve the overall quality of service that we provide through our library system. We are like head and shoulders above where we were even a couple of years ago, even dropping to 6 days a week. We're providing a much superior service. It's very troubling to me that we're losing the opportunity temporarily to offer some of the bilingual services that we've traditionally offered. It's something that's a high priority to us, but it's not something we've been able to define a solution for yet, and still be respectful of the need to work within a defined budget.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to put this on the parking, on your parking lot.
Oh,
Into your
could you speak into the mic a little better, please?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, could we ask the city manager and finance director to come up with a precise answer on...
We did the math on it, between 125 and 150,000.
Okay. When you first said it, you sounded a little uncertain.
As I was talking more and more about it, that Irene, Julie, and I have talked about this for hours and hours. The number's between 125 and 150, and that's kind of a best case scenario. As we found out this year, when we had to come in and provide additional assistance, best case scenarios are fraught with peril. And so you can expect, at a minimum, we're probably looking at $50,000 of new money from the city's general fund. I will tell you that I am, as I promised you in my comments, I am already taking steps to address the shortfall, the $130,000 shortfall that will result in staffing reductions in the city organization. And those are outside of this budget process, but they're ongoing now. And so any movement away, and you're the budget committee and ultimately the city council, and if you want to spend reserves, you can. However, I do want you to know just right at the outset that my recommendation is going to be that you don't dip any more into the reserves than we already have, because I don't think it sets a particularly bad precedent. I just don't think it's sustainable. And I think that the result will be what you faced several years ago when you chose that course of action versus making the difficult decisions that were placed before you in a time that would do the greatest good. So ultimately, it's a budget decision that you and not I will have to live with, and there's nothing that I would rather do than keep the library open full-time, but I couldn't in good conscience recommend that to you and then leave that to my successor to have to deal with.
Rick, when you say that you hope it'll be better next year, what do you think will change?
We don't know. The library staff and our counselor who's on the committee are having conversations with the county about maybe different strategies for allocating revenue from our countywide library tax, and just exploring different opportunities.
But if nothing changes, next year we'll be in the same place.
Next year we'll be in the same place, and I anticipate that this community will always be providing a level of support to our library system, as long as we want to treat it like something other than just a place that you check out books. And we've made that decision to expand our library presence to become a community gathering place, and we've supported that not only by our actions in building something that's more than book repository, but in making the decision last year and then earlier this year to continue to financially support the library. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you what might change between now and then. I think it's more likely than not that you'll be looking at another $75,000 contribution next year. And I am adding that number this year because I think it's a sustainable number. I think if you go too much above that and beyond that, I don't believe that it'll be sustainable to the city's general fund. Worst case scenario is you put a whole lot of money in it this year, and then the result is that you have to put a whole lot less money in it next year because it's one of the places that you can't fund anymore. So you have to look at both the immediate impact and opportunities and the long-term consequences of the decisions that you're going to make today.
Rick, I understand what you're saying about not dipping into the reserves. I definitely do. I'm curious if the conversation that we have over the next several months with the district starts to lean towards more funding in the future, would that change the recommendation at that point?
Well,
taken from the reserves to increase the library back, and would that be something that we could look at halfway through the year and say, we know that we're going to begin getting this revenue? Can we look at that point at taking some of those reserves to open the library back up at that point?
I've always pretty much preached to you that a budget is a living document. So, and it has to change with the facts. When the facts are more positive, then you move in a different direction than when the facts are more negative. Right now, I am operating under the assumption that the facts in the aggregate are not going to be more positive next year than they are this year. And I don't mean just in the library, I just mean in our economy generally. I think we'll see a little bit more slowdown, and the costs are not going to disappear on our overall program. So what I've tried to present to you, and you can spend the money however you want. As I've told you, I'll present to you the budget that I think is sustainable into the future, and if you choose to go a different direction, I will respect your decision. But I won't be here to help straighten it out if it gets too complex. And that's my only caveat. I do think that there are potential adverse consequences to the decisions that you make tonight if those decisions include drawing down your reserves to a level greater than we're proposing at this time.
I have a question. I'm just curious, and maybe this isn't possible, but a volunteer? Having a volunteer, have you thought
We have a lot of volunteers who serve in the library. They can only do certain, they can't replace the functions of paid staff.
Gotcha.
We're union represented employees, and so we can't supplant union employees with volunteers. We can support the activities of our labor group, our represented labor group, by having volunteers perform functions that don't immediately conflict with or compete with our paid represented employees, but we can't use those volunteers to supplant those employees.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding the library fund? Do we feel like we have reached a resolution? Do we need to put something?
We're not finalizing the library fund tonight, per
No.
se.
So that's why I'm saying, I mean, if you want to.
I feel like my questions are answered, but I'm not saying I feel resolved on it, but I feel
Sure.
like my questions are answered, but we're not finalizing the library fund tonight.
Well, no, we're just reviewing it, asking questions of the director, the directors while they are here. If memory serves me correctly, if there are other questions, we can ask them to come back in at a later time to field those questions. But I would say that if there are questions that are coming from this conversation, it would be best to say, look, we need to look into this, or we need some sort of follow-up, rather than waiting until the next meeting to ask for that follow-up.
I do have an additional question. If we varied hours over the course of the week to make room for some Sunday hours, like how do you come to the decision that just getting rid of Sunday is the best way?
It's overlapping because we're open from 10 to 8, and it's having the story times in the morning for the children, and then the teen programs and adult programs in the evenings. So it's trying to get the staffing levels balanced so you can offer the teen programs and early literacy as well as lifelong education to those in the teens in the evenings and weekends.
So from your perspective,
it's an overlap. It's because you can't, it's the 8-hour workday.
sure.
So- and then
So from
we're-
your perspective, in the funding situation, is getting rid of Sunday what you would prefer?
Yes. Only because I don't think the hours will be busy Sunday morning, and we would then be forced to open because of staffing all day Sunday from 10 to 5. And I don't,
So getting rid of Sunday is your preference as
It would
library
be.
director? Okay.
And I would just say that the library has been a very interesting beast to tackle every year. And in light of what Rick was saying, back when I originally moved to the city and started to get involved in all this stuff, the amount of activity that the library has is like out of this world compared to what it used to be. And the staff in the library have done an amazing job of making that money stretch as far as they can.
You see our schedule.
And by the way, if you have pens at home, bring them into the library. I just brought in a bunch the other day, okay?
Yes.
If you stay at hotels, get them pens for the library. So, but yeah, the message that I am getting is that the library director has said that Sunday will be the best day to cut in order to make this work. And my suspicion is when we've made other changes to the library, the activity of the library will settle back out, and that those individuals will just visit on a different day.
And I would like to also share that this conversation hasn't occurred in a vacuum. Irene and the library board have been having this discussion for months and trying to, and we place a great deal of reliance on our library board because they're so passionate about the service that they provide and about the library that we have in this community. And frankly, I almost feel that it would be a disservice to our library board to make any decision other than the one that they're recommending, which is Monday through Saturday, after the many hours that they've discussed this and have come to the conclusion that that is the way to both meet the obligations to our employees and the needs of our community.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
With that, are there any other questions regarding the library? Any follow-up that we need to add to the parking lot? Okay, then we will move on. Thank you.
The transit fund is pretty straightforward. We have Julie Hoyling in the audience today. We have a couple fairly significant projects that we're looking at in 2019-20. I think the one that will have the biggest long-term impact will be starting to take the steps necessary to begin putting into place a successor organization for when Julie decides to retire. Something we're not looking forward to, but which we all know is on the horizon. So as I mentioned to you in my opening comments, we do have some staffing recommendations for you to implement the same succession planning process that we have put into place in a couple of our other departments. We also have a recommendation to purchase property, and that property is approximately 1 acre. It's immediately to the north of the existing parking lot, bus parking lot, transit parking lot. And we're already in discussions and negotiations with the property owner on that property as well. I know that there are some significant needs for master plan updates as a result, and ultimately rebidding the transit program, but those are activities that will happen in the normal course of the next budget year and won't have a material effect on the budget that you're looking at this evening. They're just process steps that the City Council will be considering. So no real big surprises here, the big aspects of it are a land purchase and then preparing for the retirement of current transit employees. Any questions?
I have one on the increase in the, what's the term for it here, that we get from the employee tax, transit employee tax.
Very good.
Payroll tax?
The payroll tax? The pay, yes.
Turn your mic on. Gordon's in there going.
Gordon's waiting.
Oh, sorry.
How am I doing?
I gotta watch that.
$80,000 increase, are we capturing the 250 jobs from Columbia? Is that what's driving that?
I think it's just the general increase in the number of jobs. Columbia won't come on until about this time next year.
Okay, so this is absent that,
Yes.
so we should see
Even more
a bump.
when we add another
when that-
250 jobs. If there are no questions on transit, it's pretty straightforward. The swim center fund, swim center levy fund, we have a good project that is going to be underway. The City Council has already acted on a first reading for an ordinance that will allow us to move forward to replace our heating and air conditioning system in the building. It's a very old system. It needs replacement, and so we're acting as expediently as possible to put into place the contract that will allow us to order the parts. The goal of our swim center is to be able to do the installation during the month of September when the pool is down for other maintenance activities. And based on the action that you took last week, and I'm anticipating you'll take next week as you consider the second reading of the ordinance, we'll be in a good position to move that forward. On page 77, you can kind of understand some of the goals and activities of our swim center. We're proud of the community service that it performs, and particularly the swimming lessons that the youth in this community get that are kind of unique to Canby. So, yeah. Eric is here if there are any questions specifically for him.
I've got one. Remember how at one budget committee meeting years ago, Eric donated some money or loaned money? Were you held harmless on that thing? You know what I'm talking about?
We didn't donate anything.
No.
That's not exactly what
It's not exactly. I remember what you're talking about, but I can't.
Come to the mic, Eric.
When the library is.
I feel like there's a mic.
Yeah.
Like 5
Talking
years
about
ago.
the bump in funding or
Yeah.
something. I can't
What was
remember.
No, we just said that it's okay to give the library money and not give the pool money at one time, which is normal. It's fine.
Okay.
There's no, we didn't get any money, we didn't give away any money.
All right. I couldn't remember that, but I wanted to make sure you were held harmless and
Yeah, it's fine.
and given credit for your goodwill.
Your valued efforts.
Yeah. Yeah, what was that at the time? Remember that?
It was for the library.
It
Yeah.
was
Yes.
kinda
5 years ago.
It was basically a lot like what's happening this year, is they needed like $75,000 or I don't think it was actually that much, but it was something like that, where they needed some additional funding in order to stay open. So at the time, the budget committee didn't feel it was fair to give to one area of the city and not the other, and that doesn't, just got to do what you got to do in the right time.
All right. Well, then never mind.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Thanks.
The street fund, we have a fairly significant project underway on North Maple Street between 10th and 14th that will continue into the new fiscal year. That's a project that we've been working on for a couple of years in acquiring right-of-way, and the city council let the contract on that. Contractors actively engaged. We're trying to get that project completed in advance of the work commencing on the splash pad that will be occurring in the same general area. So as we are working on that project, we're also putting into place the infrastructure support that will be required to operate the splash pad. Good timing and good coordination between our street operations and our park operations. Appreciate the work they're doing. We are continuing on our street maintenance program. The city council also approved in a first reading the street maintenance program, paving program for 2019-20, so that, and the second reading to be next week on the 15th for that particular program. We are also working to get a little bit ahead of schedule on our street maintenance program, as we have some ADA ramps that we have to build, and if we're able to get in before the end of this fiscal year and start those ramps, then the paving program, we hope, will be able to complete all of the streets that we've identified for improvement, and we shared that map with the council at the last meeting that we've identified for improvement during the dry season. We had some challenges last year in getting the projects in during the dry season. We're trying to get ahead of that a little bit this year. We have an asset management program that we're working to procure as well for, and it'll assist us in our capital improvement planning. If you're interested in what we're looking at for our 5-year improvement plan, we do have a 5-year capital improvement plan that's on page 35 of, 36 of the budget book. I work very closely with Jerry Nelzine, who's in the audience this evening in his new role as a supervisor in the Public Works Department. For fiscal year 2019-20, we do not have programmed a Public Works Director. We have just a great manager in Jerry, and we have an extreme budget situation, and so we will continue to do, at least during my tenure here, what we've done in the past, which is as I will fulfill the role of Public Works Director, and I think that Jerry thinks that's working pretty well as we move along. So that's our strategy for keeping everybody whole, and are there any questions?
I have a couple real quick.
Yeah.
One is, I was up in the attic the other night, and I found the street maintenance fee task force binder from many years ago.
Of course you can.
And in it is a map of the city streets, and it's color-coded on how horrible or not horrible they are. Is there an updated version of that map?
Several.
I would love to get a copy of that,
Absolutely.
because I will put it in the binder, because it all kind of spurred based on the letter to the editor that was in the paper recently about someone scoffing at the street maintenance fee, and thought it would be good to have that information. Other question I have, and this is something that I throw out every year, and so I will throw it out again this year. Ever since that street maintenance fee was started, probably 12 years ago, it has been the same amount ever since. It is one of the few fees that this city has that is not tied to any sort of mechanism that increases it. So essentially, the amount of money that is being brought in through the street maintenance fee is covering a shorter amount than what it did when it originally started. And I just plead that the city really take a look at tying that street maintenance fee to the same metric that all the other fees are tied to ensure that in another 10 years, that $5 is only worth $2, and we're back into the same situation that we were in several years ago.
Yeah, we have, let me answer two parts, because there are really two pieces. The first Jerry had started to respond to. We do maintain a pavement condition index of all of our city streets that identify the relative quality of any street as compared with any other street. We're working on actually updating that again here in the next year or so that we have a new review of the pavement condition. We can show you very clearly the streets that have been improved through this program over the life of the program. And we can give you a really nice color coding, which, Jerry, if you don't mind working on that, we can get it out to the committee here in the next week or so.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Yeah, we keep that pretty up to date. This year, we're spending $1 million. It is not a good year to be working on streets because the cost of the petroleum products that we use in manufacturing asphalt has gone up fairly significantly, which has driven the cost of our project up to the tune of about 25% over what our estimate was. It's actually 30%, but 25% sounds better than 30%, so I'd say 25%. But to answer another question that has been asked or may be asked, we use the street maintenance fee money and the gas tax strictly for the repair of streets. And as I've mentioned to you, each of the last 3 years, and where we're legally required to do so, the improvement of the ADA ramps at the intersections. There are state laws now that preclude and prohibit us from working in the street unless we make certain improvements to the ADA accessibility of our sidewalks. So that's the exception, and we use the gas tax money to accomplish that, so that we can use 100% of the street maintenance fee money to buy and install asphalt.
Thank you, Rick.
Rick, I know you told me this and I forgot. Under miscellaneous revenue, we've got the $1 million. Does that go to the industrial park connection?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's the industrial park connection, and the revenue portion will come in. It's a project that we're currently working on to acquire some property. It's a fairly small piece, but it will be integral as we define the path that our new connector road needs to take. So.
Is that SDC driven or?
No, not at this time. That's only the urban renewal portion. Project itself is probably about a $6 million project, and this is just a very small part of it, the only part that would be eligible for urban renewal funding. And the balance of it, we'll be looking at an amendment to our transportation system plan right now we have a project called the Auto Road Extension Project that would connect the industrial park to Highway 99 via Auto Road. That's not a practical solution for a number of reasons, not the least of which there are houses in the way. But in addition to that, there are other cost factors that are involved in it. So we have an opportunity, and we're working with the property owners that are in an area not too far from there, but I can't go into too much detail yet because we're still having those conversations with the property owners about values and stuff. But our goal will be to work with our traffic engineer on developing a plan that we can submit to ODOT for their review, because the connection of the industrial road to Highway 99 makes it as much an ODOT, well, makes it more an ODOT approval process than a city approval process, because they have the ultimate veto authority on anything we do if we can't convince them that what we're proposing is not equal to or better than the safety, the corridor safety that is in place at the time that we're proposing the change. So we think we have a good plan going forward. There are a whole lot of moving parts that I can't go into a lot of detail now because of those moving parts, but so long story short, a small portion of that project should be urban renewal eligible. A large portion will be looking at a combination of grants, SDCs once we amend the transportation system plan, and some of our own internal revenue,
Okay.
which could include street maintenance fee for the asphalt.
Curb to curb,
Curb to curb,
except for ADA sidewalk part.
except for ADA sidewalks. And thank you for that.
Well, I mean, you could do whatever you want. I'm just one person, right?
No, seriously, thank you for that.
That's the Jason rule, though.
We've had, and we do know this as the Jason rule, and I actually respect and appreciate the Jason rule, with the only caveat being I have to build those ADA ramps. And if we can't build the ADA ramps, we can't do the sidewalks. So thank you so much.
Concessions must be made.
So that's our street fund. It's in really good hands with Jerry's day-to-day leadership, and we talk multiple times every day, I think, now. It's a pleasure to work with somebody of Jerry's competence. So we're in good hands. Transient room tax fund. This is a new fund. And as you remember, last year when this was created, we didn't budget any money for it because we hadn't really received any yet, and it didn't make sense. What we've done this year is we have a tourism coordinator position that we're funding a small amount of in that, and you'll see that down in the personnel services. And the balance goes to support services in our tourism program. For instance, if we need to bring public works employees in and pay them to do setup for our Canby Independence Day celebration, this would be an appropriate funding mechanism. If we need to block off streets because we have a big economic development activity downtown, this would be a reimbursement line item, and that's the service supplies at $30,270. So it's kind of one of those funds that we make available when we identify a need, but we have to tie it very specifically to this program because we wrote the rules pretty strictly, and we wrote them pretty strictly intentionally, so that people couldn't take the money and use it for activities and purposes for which it wasn't intended. We want to promote economic development and tourism, and that's really the focus here. System Development Charge Fund. This is just more a tracking fund for you. You can get an indication of where the funds are. We have $600,000 showing as a transfer to parks. That is $400,000 for the splash pad and $200,000 for a parks master plan update that we actually budgeted in the 2018-19 fiscal year, but to be very honest, I just didn't get to yet, wasn't able to finish what we started. So with your concurrence, we moved it forward to 1920 fiscal year. The request for proposals is drafted. It's ready to go out. It just needs somebody to have enough time to manage it, to manage the RFP process. We do have the money budgeted in the 1920 fiscal year to accomplish that. The other funds there are reserved for future expenditures. We have a number of projects in these different categories that we're kind of earmarking and targeting. You can see some of them in our long-term planning process as we start looking ahead to major projects. One of the largest projects that you'll probably see over the next 5 years is the 99 Industrial Park Connector Road. That's the one that will take the greatest draw. We have funds, obviously the next biggest area is in our park systems development charge, $3.5 million, still sitting in that. That can be ongoing discussions between the Parks and Rec Advisory Board and the City Council about the best ways to spend those funds. However, they have not been allocated in this budget, and that's why you're not seeing them specifically, other than the $600,000 specifically called out to a particular purpose this year. If during the year the City Council made a determination to move in a particular direction, then we could make arrangements to have funds moved in other ways.
I have a quick question about that. The dog park, is that plain dead or is it dead?
It's not dead.
Okay, that's all I was going to know.
It's not dead. It's still a topic of conversation.
Mostly dead? Oh gosh, it's only got one leg.
Princess Bride.
I caught that.
Yeah. It's still an ongoing topic of conversation, and it's on the Park and Rec Advisory Board's list of projects that they're having ongoing conversations about. Has any final disposition been determined? No, not yet. Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund, this is a restricted fund. You will note that each year the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund very graciously advances to our library fund resources that allow it to work during dry period financing. That is before the property taxes are received that supports the library. When this occurs, the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund is reimbursed fully the principal amount plus the interest on the advance completely, so that there is no lost income at all in the perpetual care budget. Julie keeps very close track of that, and we want to make sure that everybody is made whole and that each of our different programs assume their appropriate financial responsibility. So we're not spending that money, it's just there until we close the cemetery. The forfeiture fund, these are funds that we can only spend when we have them, and we can only spend on very specific items as requested by our chief. And so you'll see that the funds are fully budgeted, but we really haven't yet described what the use will be, and as uses become identified, you typically will see them as a city council come to you, and the request is made. And I think the last time we used them, if I remember right, we used them for to help in the purchase of a drug dog. And so these very restricted funds, not a lot of flexibility here for you. I will say, though, that the chief is really good when he sees an opportunity to leverage his current operations and save our city general fund some resources by combining efforts that he won't hesitate to do that, which benefits the city, benefits the community, and allows us to use these funds in a way that helps us leverage our general fund contribution to our public safety programs. The facilities budget, this is where we capture most of our facilities costs, ongoing maintenance activities. I think we pick up all of our utility costs and reallocate them for everybody except the pool, the swim center, and wastewater, because they have their own maintenance staff that manage their activities and they buy their materials directly. But this is a program that's working really well. Jerry provides supervision to our facilities program as well on a day-to-day basis. We have this fiscal year 2018-19 a new facilities staff person out of Public Works who's done just a wonderful job. We're very excited and happy that that this program is running as efficiently as it is. Fleet fund, again, an internal service fund. It is fully reimbursed for the services it provides. The two biggest users of fleet services are our law enforcement agency, the police department, and our transit program. The single biggest user is our transit program, and she almost supports it single-handedly most of the time, which is unfortunate because that just means we have a lot of buses coming in and out for service. The fleet program is running efficiently. You can see our goals for 1920 are to continue to run efficiently, see if we can tighten up a little bit on how we handle our supplies, inventories, and to just make us a little bit more accountable. Okay. Tech services. Tech services is also a critical function. All city departments are served by our tech services program. We have a combination of a technical consultant that contract which you just recently approved for another year, and in addition to that, we have in-house staff that work full-time to support our tech services activities. As you can, I'm sure, understand, we have a significant demand for these services, and our tech services department just does a wonderful job keeping us up and running. We do have budgeted for the 2019-20 budget, $30,000 so that we can do an update to our website. We haven't done this for a number of years. We debated and kind of agonized over whether this was the right year to spend $30,000 and felt that if we are going to be community-oriented and if we are going to be responsive to the needs of the community, that this, in fact, was a high priority. And so we are recommending that part of this tech service fund include that $30,000 so that we can begin a new web design.
Question. Just because we're doing this where I work also, mobile friendly. Are you planning on doing that with the website also?
The which work?
Mobile friendly, when you update the City of Canby website? Are you going to do it where it's friendly for the mobile phones?
That is way, way, way beyond my area of expertise.
Okay, there's the heads up for you.
Make it mobile friendly.
Yes.
That I will pass
Depends
that.
on how much it costs.
Yeah, we have $30,000 to work and we want to get as much as we can, and I agree, mobile friendly is a high priority.
Yes, it is.
And so we will we'll have our IT work, and we'll put as a high priority to make mobile friendly our website.
Perfect.
Did you get that note? Okay. We won't even have to put that one in our parking lot. We have it as a high priority right here.
Mobile friendly.
Bam.
I've got something there, Rick. Is there a way for us to program this in on whatever, Tim, I'm looking at you, whatever sort of period is needed now, 3 years, 5 years, but if we next year do a website update, certainly within another amount of time, we will need to do that again, that it's just technology and that sort of thing. Is it just something that we're going to have to capture on our own administratively, we're going to have to reflect on? It's not like we can have a sinking fund where we put money away each year to hit it.
No, it's not as, if it was a $150,000 expenditure, I would be encouraging something like this. If we're looking at a $30,000 expenditure, I think it's something that we plan for and we anticipate, but rather than trying to put $10,000 a year away for 3 years or 5 years, it makes more sense to just identify it as a priority in a particular budget year and work with it. We do fund on an ongoing basis a maintenance budget for our website. And we're hoping that one of the outcomes in this website redesign is that the maintenance side of it will become more user-friendly so that our departments will have the greater ability to post and update events and activities and changes to their own web presence, and that our city staff will be able to work more closely with it as well. And that will have the effect of reducing to some degree the annualized cost, and maybe at that time we can look at ways that we could do, instead of doing one big update every 5 years, just do a kind of a review, revisit, and refurbish on an annualized basis to make sure that we're staying with current technology, that we're being responsive, and that our website is reflective of what our customers might expect to see. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Very good.
I had to go to the expert on that. Sewer combined fund, this is wastewater, sanitary collection, storm system, and sewer fund not allocated is basically all the support services that supports these programs. So I'll start with wastewater treatment plan. We have 2 fairly significant projects that are underway for 1920. And when I say underway, we're looking at putting the contracts together. The expenditures are fairly significant, if I remember right. In the clarifier is $1.3 million, and then the outfall pipe replacement is $160,000. Both of these, we've had conversations with the council, so the council is generally aware of them. Primary clarifier will ultimately serve as a support system in case one of our other clarifier units happens to go down or be unusable. It also will increase our long-term capacity when if we have a need to have multiple clarifiers in place at the same time. The outfall pipe replacement is a replacement that's necessitated because the current pipe, which is an 18-inch pipe, has been in place for many, many years, and we have root intrusion into the pipe. We looked at a number of different options to replace this pipe, which is about 800 feet long, and the most reasonable and responsible one was not to just try to get by with one that we knew the roots were going to grow back up in, but in fact to look to the future 15 to 20 years, and have made a decision to move forward to replace the 18-inch pipe with the 24-inch pipe, use a type of material that is not as susceptible to root intrusion. And that project we're fast-tracking that project. The council has seen it already, so you're generally aware of it. You've either seen it or you will be seeing it. I've seen it, so I think you've seen it too. But at any rate, what we're doing is upsizing from 18 to 24 inches and replacing with a pipe that should last for the next 40 years and serve our wastewater treatment facility well. Stormwater, we have a couple dry wells that we'll be replacing, but most of I'm sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit. On the collection side, we will continue with what our Public Works has been doing, and Jerry also supervises this activity, and that is the annual cleaning of all of the collections lines, and then periodic updating and repairs and checking all of our pump stations. We have several pump stations in the city, and as we have replaced pump stations, we've upsized the pump stations themselves. We developed redundant systems. We've increased our holding capacity and done other things that we think are more fiscally responsible, that allow us to operate efficiently and reduce the incidence or the risk of spills. We've made I think some good strides. We have a big project that is pending for 2019-20, and that's the South Ivy pump station. It will be located on South Ivy, interestingly enough, towards our far southern boundary of our urban growth boundary, which is just north of the Malala River on South Ivy, on the east side of the road. We're working right now with the county to have the right-of-way transferred to the city. We're also working with Curran McLeod on a contract that City Council has approved on the design of the system, and that system will support all of the new building and growth activity that can't be served with gravity sewer, both on the east and the west side of South Ivy Street, as that continues to build out through the balance of our urban growth boundaries in that area. That project should be under construction probably late winter, early spring, I would think. Yeah. So we're working as quickly as we can on that, and Jerry's been working with Carl McLeod on a day-to-day basis and with the property owners on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we are addressing the needs of the new developments that are occurring in a cost-effective manner, and that we're using the most efficient means to be able to do that. That's wastewater collections. Stormwater, we have a couple of dry wells that we will be installing based on this, North 6th Avenue and North Ivy Street. And there may be one in the Willow Creek, in that area on Territorial, I think, depending on a number of factors. But what we try to do with our stormwater system, in addition to making sure that our regional flow systems are working properly, is we also try to identify areas where we see puddling and where we see opportunities to improve our overall drainage in the street system. And sometimes that's through connecting to existing dry wells. Sometimes that's through establishing a new dry well to address a particular need. Jerry and his crew are great at doing that. You'll actually see when they are working on roads and doing pavement projects that they spend an extraordinary amount of time in placing the catch basins to make sure that all the water drains off the streets appropriately and into the catch basins. That's why you see so few puddles in Canby, unlike so many communities that you may drive through. That's the work of Jerry and his crew. So in addition to that, we have a stormwater master plan update that is ongoing now as we speak. And that is, and I had neglected to mention it, but we have the wastewater master plan update that's occurring at the same time. I talked to you a time or two about the importance of our master planning process and how really this is the guiding these are the guiding documents that we use in our long-term planning for projects. And we identify a project that is going to cost a significant amount of money, and we don't want to bond for those projects. We identify a strategy that will allow us to raise the money, and then we identify a construction period that the project can occur based on our ability to save those funds for that particular application. There are times that we find that we are changing our priorities because something new occurs, and that's why even 5-year capital improvement plans are subject to change as the demands of the community change. And if we weren't doing that, then we wouldn't be doing our jobs. So again, Jerry does a great job. We spend a lot of time talking about what best to do using the resources we have to meet the needs of the community, and we try to be fair and equitable as we allocate those types of projects. That's our sewer and stormwater combined funds, and that.
I have a quick question about that, Rick.
Yeah.
So I know that the dry wells are a no-no.
Not anymore.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
because I was just curious, when, like, we're ripping the streets up and stuff, is part of the way I envision, like, a strategic plan of this is that we're putting pipe in to maybe someday take that water elsewhere, but it's just sort of dead, it's just sitting in there, dormant, for the magic day when we get enough money to tear everything else up and put in an actual stormwater system. Is that something that happens or not?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we are going back, we have 404 registered dry wells now we're up to. It was kind of slowed us down when we had to go away from that a period of time with the pervious pavement and stuff that didn't work and caused a lot of maintenance. But what we've been doing now is, right now we're working on updating all of our public works standards, and hopefully to have that done. I want to finish it up this winter. But doing that, what we do when the dry wells go in, because they are a lot of maintenance to maintain and everything else, we require the developer to have a geotech on site. We test each dry well so we don't put in as many as we can. But what I do when we don't put in the extra dry wells that they called for originally, I ask them to trade to connect the dry wells together. So all our dry wells are being connected so that one day when they say this has got to go down by wastewater, we're not going to have to rip everything up.
That's
so
awesome.
We are thinking that, and it will be in our design standards so that it'll just be standard operating. So.
Okay.
We have a couple right now, regional stormwater collection systems. One that runs actually right through town here, and another that runs down Redwood and Sequoia, that collect quite a bit of our stormwater. DEQ has decided for now that dry wells are not a bad thing, unlike where they were 10 years ago, where dry wells were a no-no. Now, right now, they're thinking that they're okay. There's a particular advantage in recharging the aquifer to the use of dry wells, because that's one of the positive outcomes. What you have to deal with, however, are neighbors that are less than reliable in handling material that should not be going into stormwater systems. Dumping used oil, having leaky vehicles, dumping fuels, they're pesticides, herbicides that don't belong in our system can create problems. But by and large, the systems that we have in place now are working pretty effectively. DEQ has been really supportive of our efforts. We did get slapped 3 years ago with a fine for failing to do a second stormwater runoff test and capture the stormwater runoff in the month of June. We waited a little bit too long to do that in the month of June, and there wasn't any rain. So they slapped us with the $10,000 fine. We were able to leverage that into an improvement project for a regional stormwater mitigation program that sits, or will one day sit, at the north end of Willow Creek before it enters the Willamette River. So there's some long-term plans there, and as I said, Jerry does a really good job. We're right up to speed now on all of our testing, and we make sure we do that early in the year, and that eliminates any question or concern about drought months in May and June.
Okay.
I'm done.
Very good. Okay, so with that, we have accomplished what we plan to accomplish tonight, if I am reading this correctly? Yep, okay. So now we'll open it up for committee discussion. Is there any discussion on anything we've talked about tonight and covered? Anything we need to add to the parking lot? Seeing no discussion, we will go ahead and recess, or I'd like to entertain a motion to recess this meeting to our next meeting, May 16th at 6 p.m. It's so moved by Sarah, seconded by? You'll second it? Okay. Edward, seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Are there any abstentions? None noted. This meeting is in recess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, Mayor.
Good night, Mayor.
Good night.